Hello, folks, and welcome back to Jack's Corner, where truth and reality have a seat at the table. Today, I want to talk about the communists and the communist revolution within our government, and that is driving us to Civil War 2.0. And then I want to talk about avoiding the Democrat deception that's called moral equivalency, that too many on the right side erroneously give homage to. And then I'm going to talk about how we became a country ruled by the disorder we're seeing. The Democrats use this to gain power. I also want to talk about the marriage of the Democrats with the communists, as we saw in the recent May Day 1 protests. And finally, how foreign cultures are corrupting our government from the inside. So let's get started. And to start off, I want to show you several of the revolutionaries that are pushing us into Civil War 2.0. Let's look at Representative Seth Moulton, a Democrat from Massachusetts. No surprise there. Wednesday on CNN's Out Front, Representative Moulton claimed that Secretary of War Pete Hegseth had committed war crimes. The penalty there is execution. And the host, Aaron Burnett, said, "Well, do you believe that the Secretary of Defense is guilty of war crimes?" And Moulton said, "Absolutely. I mean, he's clearly behind the operation to shoot all these boats in the Caribbean when it's very unclear that we actually have any confirmation that these so-called narco-terrorists, a term the administration invented to justify this action, are even on the boats." I mean, in fact, there is a lot of evidence that these are just fishermen, getting jobs, piloting these boats, trying to feed their families. There's been press reports that some of these individuals who have been killed are clearly not war criminals. Dear Mr. Moulton, these are sophisticated speedboats loaded with drugs, and you have done nothing while in Congress to stop the flow of drugs into this country. You are totally unaccomplished other than being a communist propagandist spreading lies against your country, you traitor. Seth Moulton is a pathological liar. He's a pathetic excuse for a man. But being a Democrat, that's simply redundant. This man has a history of being reactionary, emotionally unstable, given over to pathological lying. And in this instance, I believe he has committed the crime of being an enemy propagandist. He should have the same punishment that he is suggesting for our Secretary of War. But such a punishment would be far more fitting and just against Moulton in a time of war and giving aid and comfort to the enemy like he has. Then we have George Stephanopoulos, President Clinton's former chief of staff, who even midgets look up to. He has a short man's disease, but is historically a pathological prevaricator, and as a consequence, he has cost his employer millions because of his defamatory comments that got sued and judgments passed. But of course, there is no accountability when the left is in control of the media and the corporate executives that control it. As I told you in a recent podcast, once the Democrats get caught doing wrong and the backlash is too severe, they resort to a moral equivalency. Remember that. They're trying to make everything moral equivalent. And they simply resort to the old worn-out term that, well, everybody does it. They're doing it on each side. No, they're not. That is when I told you, no, that is not true, and it is empirically provably false. All the violence is on the left, and it is because of their psychological makeup, which I have discussed at length in many podcasts and in my books. Stephanopoulos was and is eager to neutralize the once again glaring fact that the left is violent in the aftermath of the third attempt on the president's life, and he reaches for an equivalency using a Free Palestine activist that attacked a Democrat to claim both sides are guilty of violence. How bizarre. A Palestinian activist is a Democrat. Sorry, George, wrong again. And it's time we squeeze the truth out of you and squeeze the truth out of the left and the leftist media types by putting them out of business and bankrupting them with lawsuits, defamation lawsuits. From the day after the attempted assassination, all of the Democrats were doubling down on their hate speech, referring to Trump as a Nazi and continuing their stochastic terrorism, which should fit within the definition and category of being a domestic terrorist. The Democrats live and survive off of fear tactics, name-calling, and demonizing anyone who differs with their opinions. As I have also written about and talked about many times, there is no right to lying. Lying has no right, and there is no right to an opinion divorced from the facts. The Democrats are propagandizing the public and hoping for an insurrection, and it has to be stopped by you. The days of leisure after work are gone, folks. All doubt with regard to who the enemy is has been settled. The facts all point to the Democrats. That is why they dissemble and inundate you with non sequiturs, logical fallacies, fake moral equivalencies, and just plain lying. Folks, you must stop listening to them, and you got to take action. So where did this disorder come from? Well, now there is always a cause to an effect. And with the chaos and smokescreens the Democrats use, many ask, how did all these psychos come about and rise up to leadership? Well, I dealt with that in my last podcast, and what we are dealing with is pathocracy, where the system is ruled by disorder, where moral, competent, and sane people are pushed out, silenced, or destroyed. This is where essential psychopaths rise to the top, lacking empathy, driven by narcissism, manipulation, and sadism. As spelled out by Liam DeBoer, they use society as a playground of power in a corrupt system. Their evil traits aren't a liability to them. They're an asset. Schizoids serve as the ideological architect attached and theoretical. They create inhuman policies and do so with utopianistic logic, population lockdown agendas, and so much more, and all detached from their human costs. Spellbinders are the charismatic mouthpieces, celebrities, pundits, and influencers who captivate the public with slogans about equity and safety, disguising tyranny as compassion. So this brings me to the question as to where did this all start? Well, let me start with this. Many have heard me say that there will be more clerical collars in hell than not. A lot of our country's and the world's problems started with the failures in our churches. Now, I just need to squeeze something in here real quick. This is right here. Republicans, conservatives, and Christians simply will not vote. It's amazing. And when one of them comes up to me and complains, the first thing I ask them is, well, did you vote last election? And if they say no, then I say, well, don't waste my time. You're the problem. Anyway, the Democrats do vote. And shame on us. But nevertheless, many in church leadership are wolves in sheep's clothing. False prophets, false teachers, apostates, and heretics were sent out into the pulpits, and too many of them took root, and their heresies were fertilized in seminaries where weak men failed to guard the gates and allowed error to flourish. They should have been pulled up like weeds from the garden. Last week, a pastor in the typically liberal university town of Austin, Texas, and this goes for any university town for that matter, because there's nothing smarter than an unexperienced student having learned at the feet of liberal professors. And if you don't believe me, just ask one of them. And in keeping with Austin's liberal character, we have a Presbyterian church down there pastored by a not-so-reverend James Rigby. Now, I'm going to give a bombshell here in a minute, but stick with me. Now, here we have in a deep red state of Texas, a liberal university making the city liberal, and I ask, why are conservative state legislators not cracking down, if not crushing liberalism and anti-Americanism out of these schools? Well, continuing on, you may be asking, well, why is this one guy so important? Well, he's not. He's just another reprobate wearing a robe completely divergent from the faith. But he told his congregation on Sunday, April 26th, that the MAGA movement wants to return to the Confederate States of America, following the attempted shooting at the White House Correspondents Association dinner the night before. Well, this guy Rigby should have his frock stripped from him and chased out of town. but God's revenge will be better. Mr. Rigby's non sequitur remark reveals his deceit and lie from the pulpit in that the very actions of liberals and leftists like him are the ones employing Confederate principles in cities and states across this country. In fact, about 1,100 different communities in this country have adopted sanctuary laws that abrogate and nullify federal law. This is exactly what the Confederacy did, folks, before the Civil War. But yet, once again, here we have another radical using projection to disguise their real agenda. And once again, you might or should ask, why hasn't the Supreme Court ruled sanctuary designations unconstitutional? Rigby's comments had nothing to do with the gospel. Imagine that. And inasmuch as it was not only a lie, it was devoid of any fact to support it. It was overtly wrong, political, and intended to deceive. You see, he used a venue where people come to hear good news and the truth. And more importantly, they were unarmed with critical analysis. Now, I would liken Rigby to a theological pedophile where he used his position to rape the minds of his parishioners. Well, you might ask me, why am I getting so exercised over someone that no one has heard of except for those in that community? Well, let me put it this way. From small things come big things. And if you're not paying attention to the details, it is the small detail that will take you out. A small seed, barely visible, becomes a giant redwood. And a virus that can't be seen by the naked eye can kill you. And the apostates that are in our churches are destroying a country along with it and all the freedoms that you have grown up to enjoy and love. Mr. Rigby in this, and I'm not even going to call him a reverend, Mr. Rigby in this college town of Austin, the character of which should be an anomaly for a red state like Texas, is influencing a lot of young minds and wickedly warping them. But hold on, I'm coming to the bombshell here. Why Mr. Rigby? Well, Mr. Jim Rigby leads St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Austin and has been described by James Tallarico as his mentor who taught him courage from the pulpit. In case you have forgotten or are not aware, Mr. Tallarico is now the Democrat nominee for the U.S. Senate seat for Texas. That's big. You see, you got to dig down deep and see all the connecting parts here. He wants to become a U.S. Senator. He, like other Democrat office holders and aspirants, have embarked upon a plan to hide who they really are. They take a moderate tone and use some Christian verbiage and hide behind Harry Potter's invisibility cloak, concealing who they really are and what their agenda is, just like Governor Andy Beshear from Kentucky. You better watch out for him. I know he's a pathological liar, but he's pretending to be something else. But anyway, there's just enough naive Christians out there to be deceived as they were by Jimmy Carter, who claimed before the election that he was born again. And the Christians just swooned over it, but he was anything but. And he gave us the worst government, the worst economy in the history of this country. He just about collapsed us. And he was the one that also created the tragedy of Iran that we are dealing with today. During his time, we saw, lived, and suffered greatly under the Carter deception. To make matters worse, let me strip the cloak of deceit from Rigby and tell you who and what he is all about. In 2023, Rigby led opposition to a Texas state law banning sex change procedures for minors. At St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, the congregation has a non-binary minister and displays the LGBTQ flag over the cross. The church has received a reproductive freedom designation from the Texas Freedom Network, which recognizes congregations that proudly proclaim that abortion is a moral and social good. St. Andrew's also promotes inclusive language, teaching that God is non-binary, a position Tallarico has adopted and publicly embraced. Tallarico explicitly avoids referring to God or Jesus as King or Lord, arguing such terms impose gender through feudal language. Rigby's church explains its rejection of gender language or gendered language by stating cultures that link masculinity with control over women will produce more rape. If we want to design a rape culture, sexist theology would be a good blueprint. Well, Mr. Rigby, You have raped the minds of the innocent, those sheep who come to church to hear the good news. Mr. Rigby has reserved himself a very hot place in hell because from my stint in the largest and most faithfully adherent seminary in the world to Scripture, in my years of studying Scripture, Rigby is an impostor and a fraud, or in theological terms, a heretic, and even worse, for Judgment Day, he is a false teacher. But out of that grew this guy who is now running for U.S. Senate, that is Mr. Tallarico. Folks, you are responsible for what you do and what you don't know. That's on you. You must take responsibility. Gullibility is on you, particularly if you are an adult. I grew up Methodist, and when it went woke, I left and didn't hesitate. I always listened to sermons with a discriminating ear, and I am in some ways autodidactic, that is, self-taught. After all, God didn't give us an inerrant word or manual. Yes, it is wonderful to hear the truth from a pastor and to learn, but don't play the role of a gullible fool when you have the Scriptures right before you. You have no excuse. As God said, my people will perish for a lack of knowledge. Yes, you were born into a life and an eternal existence of responsibility, not a cruise ship where you can waltz through life with neither a care. So if you are in a church like Rigby's, leave, and don't hesitate. But now we know where Tallarico's radicalism came from, the church. And this guy who believes God is non-binary could become a U.S. Senator. So now you're warned. Okay, now moving on. So what did I tell you? Since the age of 16, I saw the communist takeover of the Democrat Party coming. It wasn't a divine revelation. It was a matter of using the brain God gave me. I observed, I listened, and I learned, and particularly what the Democrats were saying. In the midst of the Cold War with Russia, the Democrats were not on America's side, except a few Southern Democrats. I tried to warn everyone, but was faced with the headwinds of being a conspiracy theorist, a derisive term that the communists came up with. Why? To shut people up. And they did for nearly 30 years, particularly after they started referring to themselves as just liberals or socialists, and now progressives. Well, now I've lived long enough to be vindicated. According to Fox Digital, at the center of May Day First mobilization, which has expanded from earlier indications, is a network of communist, socialist, Marxist, and other far-left organizations led by chapters of the Democrat Socialists of America, and a network of groups including the People's Forum, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, the Answer Coalition, and Code Pink, funded by an American-born tech tycoon, Neville Roy Singham, based in Shanghai, promoting the propaganda of the Chinese Communist Party. Folks, they are all Democrats. The Communist Party of the USA has rallied workers to rise against MAGA, and on May Day, that was May 1st, which they did, and they promoted leaflets by the People's World, its Marxist-Leninist publication. The Revolutionary Communist Party has put out a call to dismantle the capitalist imperialist system. The Maoist Communist Union, that's from China, has summoned members to join the anti-imperialist contingent at the New York City protest. So I told you so. Civil War 2.0 is around the corner, and I would bet that many out there will continue to live in denial that nothing bad will come about as a result of all this. It is a suicidal denial. It is a psychosis, a detachment from reality on the right side of the spectrum. It will erupt in violence at some point. Then there will be no comfort or convenience for you as you sit on your couch watching Netflix. For some of you, your children will die in conflict, and you will wring your hands and ask, how could this happen? Well, go look in the mirror. Look at your checkbook. Look at your calendar. As the communists were taking over, you were being told. And what were you doing? I'm doing my part, and it has cost me a fortune. But I'm doing the groundwork in bringing you the facts and their implications to get you to act and to do so now, not to wait. We've got elections coming up. We've got the midterms coming up. You should be startled by the current events, and if you are not, then you face an existential event in the very near future. Now, as reported in Breitbart's News on Friday's broadcast of the Fox News channel's Jesse Waters Primetime, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania said that there is kind of a small communist takeover in Maine. I can't believe I heard those words, a small communist takeover. Waters asked, well, how big of a threat do you think this communist movement is? And Fetterman, remember, he's a Democrat. Fetterman answered, a lot of these terrible groups like Code Pink and a lot of other ones that are strongly aligned to the CCP, that's the Communist Party of China, without a doubt they're being financed. It's ironic. These kinds of protests are being funded by billionaires against billionaires. I don't know if they realize the irony in many of those things right now. And now there is a kind of small communist takeover in Maine. Plattner, he's the one with the Nazi tattoo, you know? Plattner, he's already announced that he's an avowed communist. He made that statement and he put that online. Now, this is things that are what Fetterman's saying. He continues on. He says now he's going to be the Democrat nominee. So there's a resurgence of socialism, and that's become more and more a part of it. And now there's more. It's like a marriage of the Palestinian, the anti-ICE, the abolish ICE, and now turning it into an orgy of socialism here. And that's sad because it's supposed to be about labor, like unions. Then he went on to say, I'm absolutely a proud pro-union Democrat, but the kinds of mess that you are seeing showing up in many of them, that is the worst impulses that our party continues. We just can't seem to resist those things. Folks, this is a Democrat Senator, Fetterman, telling you of a communist problem, and it is with the Democrat Party. I've been saying this since the age of 16. Communism is antithetical to our Constitution. It must be outlawed, and those billionaires supporting it need to be indicted, their wealth confiscated, and then incarcerated. Our Constitution was not meant to be a suicide pact, folks. This is a byproduct of panorology. Now, for those not familiar with the term, panorology is a study or the science of evil, analyzing its origins, its nature, and development, particularly on a macro-social or political level. It's derived from the Greek paneros, which means wicked. It often investigates how pathological personalities influence social systems leading to crisis like pathocracy. Who's at fault? Many of you may be. Think about it. During our primaries, we are lucky to get 30% of the people to vote. And in primaries, the Democrats always show up in force, but not the people who complain the most about the chaos in the country. I'm trying to inform you that there is an explanation for why evil is driving us to Civil War 2.0. And there is terminology out there that describes it and defines it. You are not crazy. It's those we have placed into power and those we have not put in jail. It's also those of us who have sat on our asses doing nothing in the advance of communism in this country. You must wake up. If America fails, there is nowhere to turn. When you now have some Democrats saying what Fetterman just said, you know it has to be really, really bad. Let me tell you, it's even worse. And it is warnings like this that will end up being your worst nightmare because you will only have yourselves to blame. Now, here's a tidbit of common sense for you. Would you ever go to a homeless man on the street and ask them for financial advice? Well, I hope not. But I know you wouldn't because you are reading or listening to this podcast. Well, recently Trump gave a speech in Florida, and he referenced that fraud from Somalia who married her brother to get into America and then runs for Congress. That's Ilhan Omar. I'm sure you have heard of her and all her diatribes as to how bad America is. All the while, she is a ringleader in the Somalia fraud in Minnesota to the tune of $19 billion. And yes, that's your money. Anyway, much of the fraud was coming from migrants that was reported to have taken place in states such as Minnesota and California. Trump stated, and this is true, that Somalia has no government or military. There is no government structure there. It is total chaos. And Trump added that crime was the one thing that Somalia had, which was really strong, but absolutely true. They come here, and Trump said in regard to Ilhan Omar, do you ever hear of her? She heads it. Think of it. They have nothing but crime, poverty, pollution, and everything is horrible over there. Nothing is good. And then she comes here into this country, and they say it's the worst country anywhere in the world. Can you imagine that? Then here is your tidbit of common sense from Trump. He said she comes here from Somalia, and she tells us how to run the United States of America. Wow. I truly hope you have asked yourself the same question. If not, then you may want to take some courses on logic and syllogistic thinking, maybe some deductive reasoning, because you should have asked these questions yourselves. Oh, and by the way, this is too rich to pass up. Omar last month listed her wealth as $30 million, and nearly a month earlier, it was only around $3,000. Then it jumped to $30 million, and now she has reversed course again and placed her worth at around $30,000. Folks, this woman is in Congress telling you how to run this country and voting to tax you more and more. If you are not native born, you should not be in Congress. You should not be in our national government, and we've got to change that. Cultures are very important, and the American culture is the envy of the world. It is what has made us and what we are. Foreign-born do not understand the culture and rarely can. It is time that we get back to immigration of only those who can support themselves and having something to offer this country, not to be a burden on us or to tell us how to run our country. All right, folks, that will be enough to chew on for today. And with that, I'm Jack Richardson for Jack's Corner.